as human civilizations rose, the diseases also struck them down. In the realm of infectious diseases, a pandemic is the worst case scenario. What is a pandemic? It is an epidemic occurring worldwide, crossing international boundaries and usually affecting large number of people. Let us see a timeline of pandemics that changed the human history. Number 1. The Plague of Athens, 430 BC. In the second year of the Peloponnesian War, 430 BC, an outbreak of plague erupted in Athens. The origin of the disease occurred in the sub-Saharan Africa just south of Ethiopia. The disease swept north and west through Egypt and Libya, across the Mediterranean Sea into Persia and Greece. The plague entered Athens through the city's port of Piraeus. According to the various scholars, by its end, the pandemic killed upwards of one-third of the population, a population which numbered 250,000 to 300,000 in the 5th century BC. By most accounts, the plague which struck Athens was the most lethal episode of illness in the period of classical Greece history. Number 2. The Antonine Plague, 165 AD. The Antonine Plague, sometimes referred to as the Plague of Galen, erupted in 165 AD at the height of Roman power throughout the Mediterranean world. It was possibly an early appearance of smallpox that began with the nomadic warriors. The first phase of the outbreak would last until 180 AD, affecting the entirety of the Roman Empire, while a second outbreak occurred in 251 to 266 AD, compounding the effects of the earlier outbreak. It has been suggested that a quarter to a third of the entire population perished, estimated at 60 to 70 million throughout the empire. Number 3. The Plague of Cyprian, 250 AD. The Plague of Cyprian erupted in Ethiopia around Easter of 250 AD. It reached Rome in the following year, eventually spreading to Greece and further east to Syria. The source of the terrible affliction was interpreted by the pagans as a punishment from the gods. The plague lasted nearly 20 years and, at its height, reportedly killed as many as 5,000 people per day in Rome. Number 4. The Justinian Plague, 541 AD. During the reign of the Emperor Justinian I, from 527 to 565 AD, one of the worst outbreaks of the plague took place, claiming the lives of millions of people. The plague arrived in Constantinople in 542 AD, almost a year after the disease first made its appearance in the outer provinces of the empire. The means of transmission of the plague was the black rat, which travelled on the grain ships and carts sent to Constantinople as a tribute. The outbreak continued to sweep throughout the Mediterranean world for another 225 years, finally disappearing in 750 AD and had killed about 50 million people, which is 26% of the world population. Number 5. The Black Death, 1350. The Black Death was a plague pandemic which devastated Europe from 1347 to 1352 AD, killing an estimated 25 to 30 million people. The disease, caused by a bacillus bacteria and carried by the fleas on rodents, originated in Central Asia and was taken from there to the Crimea by the Mongol warriors and traders. It was known as the Black Death because it could turn the skin and sores black, while other symptoms included fever and joint pains. With up to 2/3 of the sufferers dying from the disease, it is estimated that between 30% and 50% of the population of those places affected died from the Black Death. Dead bodies became so prevalent that many remained rotting on the ground and created constant stench in the cities. Number 6. The First Cholera Pandemic. The first cholera pandemic emerged out of the Ganges Delta with an outbreak in Jessore, India in 1817, stemming from the contaminated rice. The disease quickly spread throughout most of India, modern-day Myanmar, and modern-day Sri Lanka by traveling along trade routes established by the Europeans. However, the cholera pandemic haven't subsided till date. Between 1852 and 1923, the world could see 4 more cholera pandemics, killing about thousands of people worldwide. The current and the 7th pandemic started in the South Asia in 1961 and reached Africa in 1971 and the Americas in 1991. Cholera is now endemic in many countries. Number 7. The Third Plague Pandemic, 1855. The Third Plague Pandemic was a major bubonic plague pandemic that began in Yunnan, China in 1855 during the 5th year of the Xianfeng Emperor of the Qing dynasty. This episode of the bubonic plague spread to all inhabited continents and ultimately led to more than 12 million deaths in India and China, with about 10 million killed in India alone. In the city of the Canton, beginning in March 1894, the disease killed 80,000 people in a few weeks. Within 2 months, after 100,000 deaths, the death rates dropped below epidemic rates, but the disease continued to be endemic in Hong Kong until 1929. According to the World Health Organization, the pandemic was considered active until 1960, when the worldwide casualties dropped to 200 per year. Number 8. The Fiji Measles Pandemic, 1875. The worst disaster Fiji has ever experienced was the 1875 measles outbreak. After Fiji gave up the power to the British Empire, a royal party visited Australia as a gift from Queen Victoria. Arriving during a measles outbreak, the royal party brought the disease back to their island, and it was spread further by the tribal heads and police who met with them upon their return. Spreading quickly, the island was littered with corpses that were scavenged by wild animals, and entire villages died and were burned down, sometimes with the sick trapped inside the fires. 1/3 of the Fiji's population, a total of 40,000 people, died during this pandemic. Number 9. The Russian flu, 1889. The first significant flu pandemic, which started in Siberia and Kazakhstan, traveled to Moscow and made its way into Finland and then Poland, where it moved into the rest of the Europe. By the following year, it had crossed the ocean into North America and Africa. By the end of 1890, 360,000 people had died. It was the last great pandemic of the 19th century. Number 10. The Spanish flu, 1918. The avian-borne flu was an unusually deadly influenza pandemic caused by the H1N1 influenza A virus. It resulted in 50 million deaths worldwide. The 1918 flu was first observed in Europe, the United States, and parts of Asia before swiftly spreading around the world. At the time, there were no effective drugs or vaccines to treat this killer flu strain. Wire service reports of a flu outbreak in Madrid in the spring of 1918 led to the pandemic being called the Spanish flu. By October, hundreds of thousands of Americans died and body storage scarcity hit crisis level. But the flu threat disappeared in the summer of 1919 when most of the infected had either developed immunities or died. Number 11. The Asian flu, 1957. The 1957 to 1958 influenza pandemic, also known as the Asian flu, was a global pandemic of influenza A virus subtype H2N2 that originated in Guizhou, China, and killed at least 1 million people worldwide. Starting in Hong Kong and spreading throughout China and then into the United States, the Asian flu became widespread in England, where over 6 months 14,000 people died. A second wave followed in the early 1958, causing an estimated total of about 1.1 million deaths globally, with 116,000 deaths in the United States alone. A vaccine was developed effectively containing the pandemic. Number 12. The HIV or AIDS pandemic, 1981. First identified in 1981, AIDS destroys a person's immune system, resulting in the eventual death by diseases that the body would usually fight off. Those infected by the HIV virus encounter fever, headache, and enlarged lymph nodes upon infection. When symptoms subside, carriers become highly infectious through the blood and the genital fluid, and the disease destroys T cells. AIDS was first observed in the American gay communities, but is believed to have developed from a chimpanzee virus from the West Africa in the 1920s. The disease, which spreads through the certain body fluids, moved to Haiti in the 1960s and then New York and San Francisco in the 1970s. Treatments have been developed to slow the progress of the disease, but 35 million people worldwide have died of AIDS since its discovery, and a cure is yet to be found. Number 13. SARS, 2003. First identified in 2003, after several months of cases, severe acute respiratory syndrome is believed to have possibly started with the bats, spreading to cats and then to humans in China, followed by 26 other countries, infecting 8,096 people with 774 deaths. SARS is characterized by the respiratory problems, dry cough, fever, and head and the body aches, and is spread through the respiratory droplets from coughs and sneezes. Quarantine efforts proved effective, and by July, the virus was contained and hasn't reappeared since. The ongoing pandemic, COVID-19. On March 11, 2020, the World Health Organization announced that the COVID-19 virus was officially a pandemic after barreling through 114 countries in 3 months and infecting over 118,000 people. And the spread wasn't anywhere near finished. COVID-19 is caused by a novel coronavirus, a new coronavirus strain that has not been previously found in people. Symptoms include respiratory problems, fever and cough, and can lead to pneumonia and death. Like SARS, it is spread through droplets from sneezes. The outbreak was first identified in December 2019 in the Wuhan province of China. As of 13 August 2020, more than 20 million cases of COVID-19 have been reported in more than 188 countries and territories, resulting in more than 749,000 deaths. More than 12.8 million people have recovered. Scientists around the world are working tirelessly on the potential treatments and developing vaccines. However, there are many ongoing clinical trials evaluating the treatments and vaccines for COVID-19. Meantime, it will require all of the society to limit the spread of COVID-19 and to cushion the potentially devastating impact it may have on the vulnerable people and their economies.